The Marvel Cinematic Universe has faced some major problems. People were disappointed with Phase 4, and the start of Phase 5 has been pretty weak, but things aren't looking any better after Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, because the numbers don't lie. It has had the worst drop for an MCU title at the box office. I have a bunch of different things to show off, but before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or mine so that you can see when my content is posted. And of course, if you do really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon or a supporter via YouTube memberships. So, this is a Deadline article. It talks about a couple of different films, but the headline is Quantumania still the worst drop for an MCU title. Now, they seemed pretty confident in this film. They were hoping that this was going to kick the new phase into high gear. People were really going to enjoy it, and I'm sure that they were hoping it would make them a boatload of money, but unfortunately for them, it doesn't look like that's the case. It says Disney/Marvel's official numbers for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania still show the worst drop for an MCU title at 69.6%, with 32.3 million after an estimated 14.6 million on Saturday, plus 76% for a running total of 167.2 million in first place. How will Marvel post-mortem this? Aren't they trying already plussing with every movie they make, meaning putting it on to Disney Plus only a couple of weeks after launch so that they can potentially make more money off of it? And yeah, this is a problem that Disney and Marvel are facing at this point. They continue to make these giant movie theater films, giant movies that should be box office hits, but unfortunately for them, they are not really able to connect with their audience anymore. They are not making things that people want to really go and see in the theaters, because a lot of people go, I'll just wait until it's on Disney Plus, and that's how, I honestly view it. While yes, I do watch a lot of new movies because I'm talking about them on the channel and I want to be able to judge them myself, most of these films do not deserve a trip to the theater. Most of these films, I don't want to pay $20 per ticket for, and unfortunately for Marvel, it's my money that they're missing out on, and it is stinging for them. Years ago, I totally would have went to the theater to see a new Ant-Man movie. I really enjoyed the first Ant-Man film. The second one was definitely not as good as the first, but it wasn't terrible. This one, though, it just really didn't draw in my attention, and now, clearly they're not really drawing in a lot of people's attention because it's the worst drop for an MCU title, and we've actually heard this quite a bit over the past 2 years. We continue to hear this next MCU movie is the worst MCU drop, and this movie, dropped more than they expected. Even though something like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness made a lot of money, it still had a 60% drop. I can't really say I'm surprised to hear these numbers, because as the MCU has continued, these movies feel more and more like low-budget scripts with low-budget acting wrapped up with high-budget CGI. I have to wonder if films like this are only getting high user scores because of Marvel superfans, which is okay if they like it, but it might not represent everyone, since the people who didn't love previous MCU films aren't even seeing these new releases anymore, and they're probably waiting to see it on Disney Plus. And now it is actually overthrowing Black Widow, one of the worst films that I've seen in the past few years. Black Widow suffers worst box office collapse in MCU history. This was back in July of 2021, so it said just over a week after helping bring the box office back to life. Black Widow has started its rapid descent potentially quicker than what most theater insiders even anticipated. It said after last weekend's record-setting 80 million opening haul for the pandemic, Black Black Widow dropped 67.5% in its second week, another Marvel record in and of itself. And of course, they decided to say, oh, it's only because of the pandemic, but people showed up week 1 to see it, and people did show up week 2 to see it. It just was significantly less individuals. I don't really think it was because of the pandemic at this point. I do truly believe it is because the quality of content. This movie is terribly rated. Basically, everybody disliked it. Even the Disney shills were like, this is a really mediocre film, and it just wasn't an entertaining movie. And the scores for Ant-Man also were not good, because Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania now tied as the worst reviewed MCU movie. It says, in an auspicious time for Marvel as their newest release, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania has now seen its review scores drop so low that it's tied with Eternals as the worst reviewed MCU film ever. And of course, they are talking about critic reviews, because the user reviews are actually pretty decent for Ant-Man. I mean, sitting at an 83% audience score, which of course is not perfect, but it is far from being awful. But the critic scores are just not good. I personally don't really like referencing the critic scores a lot. I don't really believe them. If a critic reviews something poorly, I'll still probably see it if I want to, but it's just still another very bad headline for this film. It says a week ago, when I was first documenting its review scores, Quantumania had a 53%, but since then, dozens more reviews have been added, bringing it down to a 47%, the same score as the much disliked Eternals. And Eternals was a movie that was, pretty poorly rated from the critics and the audiences, because it just had so many characters that it was throwing at you in such a quick time frame. I've said it before, but the basis of Eternals wasn't what was bad, it was the execution. They should have made a Disney Plus series introducing most of the Eternals, and then had the movie be like the second half of the film that we actually got, and put all the action into it and all of like that unification of the characters. They didn't do that, and of course Marvel's is one of the worst critic reviewed MCU films. But yeah, I mean, all of these movies that I'm talking about here, Black Widow, Eternals, Ant-Man Quantumania, they're all breaking each other's records for the worst MCU films, which definitely isn't what Disney wants to hear. It says, however, it should be noted that this is one instance where there's been a major critic and audience split. There's major critic and audience splits for a lot of films, and usually these articles don't really cover it, because of course all these reviewers really care about is the best number. They only care about if users rate it poorly, they can talk about that, but usually they want to talk about how critics love something. The critics love patting each other on the backs. They love, propping up the scores when they're really, really good for critic numbers, because, well, they want to say, well, critics love it, so why don't you? And then, of course, it just causes that divide between the reviewers and the audiences. But they are pointing out that there is a pretty big difference here. While this movie is obviously making them money, we'll have to see how much it ends up making in a few weeks at the end of its box office run. I'm curious to see if it will make as much as they were potentially expecting, but the drops are not good. It is now tied as the worst critic-reviewed MCU film, and of course, Quantumania had the worst drop for an MCU title. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this and found it important and informative, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.